with all the offseason moves over, from free agency to the NFL draft, these are the 5 players who are skyrocketing up my rankings the most. And we could start with Marquise Hollywood Brown, who in my opinion is the best wide receiver on the Kansas City Chiefs right now. Because if you look at this team, yes, of course, you're going to think about Rashee Rice, who led the team at the wide receiver position as a rookie last year with over 100 targets, but he's dealing with multiple off-field issues, right? An incident at a club, an incident in terms of speeding, so we'll see if he gets a suspension. And then there's the first-round pick, Xavier Worthy. He has all the upside in the world, but he just hasn't shown it in the NFL yet. While on the other hand, Marquise Brown now has 100-plus targets in 4 straight seasons across multiple teams. And based on where he's going in drafts right now, I just think it's far too late. He's currently going, I mean, this is going to change depending on the platform you're looking at. I'm looking at Underdog, Best Ball here, wide receiver 35, which even for a draft where wide receivers go early, this is pretty late in my opinion. I currently have him in the fantasy blueprint around higher than this. Jaden Reed, Terry McLaurin, I don't think these guys should be going ahead of him, especially his teammate Xavier Worthy, who we just mentioned. Now, let's be real for a second. I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to lead the league in passing. I think they're going to do exactly what they did last year and lean heavily, like they did towards the end of the year, on Isaiah Pacheco in the run game. But even with that said, Mahomes is still going to be throwing 35-plus times a game. That's just how the NFL is these days. And Marquise Brown this offseason, he only signed a 1-year deal. He's a free agent again in 2025. You can see right here, he got about $6.5 million. So nothing crazy in this contract. It was kind of, I believe, really cheap. I thought he might go for maybe even double this on a 1-year deal. So he's again in a kind of spot where he should be motivated going into a contract year. And not only can he win with his 4.3 speed, but over the years, he's put on more size. He's now in the 170-pound range, and he could be more physical at the catch point. And unlike Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, who was in this role last year, Hollywood Brown just doesn't drop the ball. Only 1 drop last year, a 1% rate, which is way lower and way more reliable of a player than MVS. Now, I do get, if you look at last year, a lot of people might point to the fact that, oh, Marquise Brown, he was like the wide receiver 1 on the Cardinals, and he still finishes the wide receiver 49 in fantasy, but that wasn't all his fault. Not even close, in my opinion, because right here you can see his catchable target rate. He ranked 96th in catchable targets, which, look, here's what this means. Only 56% of his targets were catchable, which means 44%, close to half of his targets, weren't even catchable. He wasn't getting accurate targets. And that should be better this year with Patrick Mahomes, and he should also see more than 3 or 4 touchdowns like he's seen the past 2 years, so I do think he's going to be a top 30 receiver. Now we're going to move to the Detroit Lions wide receiver room, and I was actually pretty surprised. They didn't make any wide receiver moves this offseason despite losing veteran Josh Reynolds. And Josh Reynolds was a pretty significant piece of this offense. Wasn't the wide receiver 1, of course, that's Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Sam Laporta was there, but he still caught 40 balls for 604 receiving yards, and according to the Athletics Football Podcast, 50% of Reynolds' receptions went for first downs, which was the 3rd best rate in the league. And with him gone, the 3rd-year player Jameson Williams, the former first-round pick, is going to have to step up, and that's exactly what the Lions coach Dan Campbell has said multiple times this offseason. And look, Jameson's had a weird career so far. As a rookie, he was injured for most of the year and really not put into play, and then in his 2nd year, he started the season with a suspension for gambling. So now he's heading into his 3rd year. We're in the NFL through 2 seasons so far. The dude only has 25 catches, which obviously makes him a bit of a sketchy player, but he should finally see a larger role, or at least have that opportunity heading into 2024. And if you're not familiar, he's a speedster. If you look right here on Player Profiler, he ran a 4.39 40 time at the NFL Combine. That's right here, which is, top 5, top 10% of all time. And this is what his role is. It was this in college. He's just going to be a guy who goes out there and sees downfield usage, right? 5th in average target distance last year because of that speed, but maybe they could put him in some situations where he can actually develop and thrive after the catch thanks to that speed. That's where you can get taken to a next level. And that's kind of what we saw towards the end of last season when he started to see these 70% snap shares and had 2 or more receptions in 6 straight games. And it all kind of capped off in that NFC Championship game where he was highly involved. Now, he only had 3 touches in the game on 4 opportunities, right? But he ends up having 67 total yards with the rushing and receiving and a couple of different touchdowns showing his big playability. But we have to be real for a second because there is somewhat of a capped upside to what Jameson Williams can do this year. Because Amon-Ra St. Brown is there, a guy who's going to see top 5 wide receiver usage, just got paid $120 million this offseason. And also Sam Laporta, who as a rookie saw 120 targets last year. He's going to be the number 2 option behind Amon-Ra. So Jameson doesn't really have a ton of upside. You factor in the running backs as well here. A ton of upside to be, let's say, a top 10 or top 20 receiver, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have value. Because in a good offense, with an offensive coordinator and Ben Johnson coming back, he could still be a top 36 receiver, top 40 receiver, which means, yeah, you can still get him at a nice price tag. And if Amon-Ra St. Brown was to miss time, well, that's where all the upside comes in. Because right now, Jameson goes as the wide receiver 48 in drafts. He actually goes even later in other types of formats that aren't best ball, like outside the top 120 picks. And I believe that he's probably going a little bit too late. I have him about a round earlier this in the fantasy blueprint, which we'll talk more about that blueprint later on. But if you want to check it out, it's linked down below in the description. Now let's go to this next player who I think honestly has like top 5 upside at the wide receiver position. And that's going to be Chris Olave, who last season for the Saints, in his first year with Derek Carr, he goes out there and he's a top 20 receiver. And he just continued his success from his rookie year, ranking 21st in wide receiver receiver efficiency, and he had the 4th most deep targets in the NFL. There really wasn't a lot of target competition, so Derek Carr kind of knew who his alpha was and just targeted him. 8.6 targets per game was top 12 in the NFL. He earned 25% of the Saints' target share, and honestly, that might only get better this year because there's really no competition. You start to look for where threats can come in from, and in the wide receiver room, they added a 5th rounder in Bub Means. Okay, maybe he could be something that we're not expecting, but as of right now, not thinking too much about Bub Means. And then Cedric Wilson is currently this team's maybe starting slot wide receiver, and he's just a journeyman wide receiver at this point. Didn't do much with the Dolphins, not believe that he's going to do much with this team, or at least not a lot of faith there. So Rashid Shaheed, a downfield option, and A.T. Perry, a second-year player who's a bigger body guy, maybe a red zone guy, but not someone who's going to command, 5, 6, 7, 8 targets a game. So there's not a ton of target competition, and Olave is going to have a new offensive coordinator this year in Clint Kubiak. We have to talk about it. He was the 49ers passing game coordinator last year, and he led them to being a top 10 unit. Now, Kubiak has been most vocal this season on improving the Saints' run game and mostly their run blocking because they had a bad offensive line last year. But they're kind of putting their money where their mouth is, if you will, because the Saints in the NFL draft ended up going out there, and in the first round, they ended up taking a tackle in Fuaga out of Oregon State to try and help this offensive line that did indeed struggle last year. Now, I'm not going to lie, the biggest concern is this offensive line, and Derek Carr, when faced with pressure, isn't all that great. So if he can remain upright, and maybe this first round pick helps that, of course, that's going to also benefit Chris Olave, who, just a reminder, is entering his 3rd year, so the prime of his career with no target competition added, and now a full off season to kind of work with this new offensive coordinator and also his quarterback, Derek Carr. Now, the 4th guy I want to talk about, he's the Chargers rookie, 2nd round rookie they traded up for in Ladd McConkey, and it's hard to believe that he's not going to be significantly involved right away. Because if we look at this Chargers team, if we assume the veteran Gus Edwards starts, he's not much of a pass catching threat. If we go down to the tight end position, they don't have Gerald Everett anymore, so Will Dissly, Donald Parham, none of these guys are pass catching threats. So now we go to the wide receiver room. This is where all of the target competition for Ladd McConkey is going to come in, and you basically get Josh Palmer, who I think is a solid option as like a wide receiver 2 or 3 on a team, but not going to command 7+ targets a game. And after that, it's some 7th round rookies in Cornelius Johnson and Brendan Rice, and then Quentin Johnson, who last year as a rookie struggled, kind of this intermediate deep player. Maybe he takes a step forward, but we didn't see that last year, and now he's going to have even more attention on him this year. And then you have McConkey, who, yeah, he's a rookie, but he profiles out immediately as the best route runner on this team, who can also win in the slot and out wide, probably the most versatile player on this team as well. And if you don't know much about him, McConkey ranked 4th in the SEC last year in yards per route run, and he's a creative route runner. Now, of course, this Chargers offense that is now under control of Jim Harbaugh is going to be run heavy, but it's not like they're going to run 70% of the time, because this is the NFL passing attempts per team last year, and the 49ers ranked dead last, and they still threw 491 times. So even if you're throwing at the dead last rate in the league, you're still going to throw 500 times, which means if McConkey can just earn a below average 20% target share for a team's wide receiver 1, he's seeing 100 targets right away as a rookie. But that's if we're extremely conservative with all of our projections. We should expect more than that this year, because this Chargers offense has nothing in the passing attack. You can see right here, they lead the NFL according to FTN Fantasy, having 250 vacated targets left. They don't have Keenan Allen, they don't have Gerald Everett, they don't have Mike Williams, and they also lead the NFL this offseason with about 1,800 receiving yards to replace. Again, they're going to be more run heavy this year, but they're still going to pass the ball more than 50% of the time or so. So Ladd McConkey, who currently goes as the wide receiver 39 on Underdog, and honestly, in a lot of other places, he's going as like the wide receiver 50 right now. If you look at places like Sleeper and some other platforms, that's just, I think, irresponsible. I think there's a pretty good chance he's earning at least 115 to 20 targets this year, and if that's the case, a top 36 wide receiver is almost a definite. Now, before we transition to this next guy who has skyrocketed up the rankings the most this offseason for me, I want to let you know about the Fantasy Blueprint. Look, your fantasy drafts are getting closer. It doesn't seem like it, but the summer is here. If you want to win your fantasy league, this is our 3rd year doing the Fantasy Blueprint. All you got to do is follow these 2 simple steps, and here's the deal. If you don't make your fantasy playoffs, you get this all year long, not just for the summer, but every single week of the year. I send you tools to help you win your individual matchup that week. For some reason, you don't make your fantasy playoffs, it's risk-free. I'll just refund the one-time payment of $10. Again, to get this, it's linked down below. And last year, we had over 1,000 people use the Fantasy Blueprint, and only 3 people reached out for a refund, so the far majority of people, 99.7% of them, ended up finding this helpful and or made their playoffs. So to get access to your Fantasy Blueprint at its lowest price that it will be all summer long, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen or click that link in the description below. And the player who has skyrocketed up my rankings the most this offseason is going to be Isaiah Pacheco, because not many people benefited as much as this guy did because the Chiefs didn't add anybody in the draft or free agency. Specifically, of course, at the running back position. And if you think about how the Chiefs succeeded last year with an aging tight end in Travis Kelce, no reliable wide receiver 1, it was for the first time ever in Andy Reid's career through the run game. Because over the second half of the season, Pacheco averaged 20.2 touches per game and 19.9 fantasy points per game. And this only continued into the postseason. You can see right here, first round, he gets 15 carries, 97 rushing yards, not even factoring in his receiving. receiving yards. Second round, 24 rush attempts in a game where they just ran the ball against Baltimore. And then in the Super Bowl right here, 18 rush attempts. You factor in his receptions of 6. He had 24 plus touches in the 2 biggest games of the year to close it out. This offense went through Isaiah Pacheco. And the role should only continue in 2024 because the team, although they did improve the wide receiver position, no clear-cut alpha still, and Travis Kelce is still getting older. And another added benefit is Pacheco still was efficient, his yards per carry remaining high, and his receptions was the big one. He went from 13 receptions as a rookie to 44 receptions last year. Jerick McKinnon being hurt, not playing a lot helped this, and McKinnon is, as of right now, no longer with the team. Which leaves the biggest competition right now for him, a bunch of no-names players. Deneric Prince, Keontae Ingram, and then you also did have his teammate from last year, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, recently re-signed a 1-year deal, so nothing crazy here. He's never threatened Isaiah Pacheco in the past. If anything, this, Clyde Edwards-Helaire right here, signing a new contract with the team is only a benefit to Pacheco because we already know that he will beat him out for any significant touches. And to make that clear, Pacheco will beat out Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Pause. Right now, Isaiah Pacheco goes as the 46th overall player. He's currently a 4th-round pick, and I think that's way too late. Honestly, he's a top 10 running back for me. He is a 2nd-round pick, in my opinion, for fantasy based on the offense he's in and the way he's going to be utilized. He is skyrocketing up the rankings and a great value right now. So these are the players who are moving up my ranks the most this offseason based on all the moves. And if you want to see my top 12 overall players based on everything that's happened this offseason, well, you can check out this video. It's going to pop up somewhere. Right over here, we have the top 12 overall players for you. And if you're not already, be sure to hit the subscribe button on this channel as we push towards 100,000 subscribers. I appreciate you all a ton, and I'll see you in the next one.